For this exercise, you'll be using a reference picture and there's a selection that you get to choose from. So I'm using this model and I have that clipped to my board so the reference picture is positioned right above where I plan on working. And I'm going to be sizing up. So I want to make these eyes a little bit larger than life. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm starting out with tick marks. I've put 2 small light marks down and that indicates the length of one eye. And now I'm going to use measuring. To measure, I'm taking the point of my pencil and I'm aligning it up with my first tick mark, the one that's on the left side. Then I take my index finger and I use the tip of my index finger or my nail on that index finger and I pinch off. So the measurement is happening right at my index finger. And then once I have that, I can make a little mark there and I can gauge things using that. It is a difficult technique and it's one that you use in college, but if you can memorize it, it will help you so much. Start to use it. You can also measure, and I just measured that to see how long of an eye I'm actually making, and it's close to 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, somewhere in between there. So here I am measuring because I want to put a third eye in there, and I'm not literally going to put it in there, but here's one of those proportion rules. You can fit a third eye in between 2 eyes, and you can try this out on yourself, see if you subscribe to this rule. But if you take your left eye and you kind of take that measurement with your fingers and put it in between the 2 eyes, most people follow that. You can see I'm trying it on her, and it's true of this model as well. I'm going to press too hard. Right now I'm trying to get the heights of each eye, and you kind of have to just look at it and judge it. There's no exact measurement, but basically for the shape of one eye, you want to think like a football shape. And you can see I'm going back in with the eraser to lighten that even more. And then I'm going to check the height of the left eye to the right eye by using my measuring. And I'm just making sure I'm adjusting it right now at this stage because I want it perfect at this stage. I don't want to have to be fussing with it later on. And now I'm getting in the heights of the eyebrow, the placement of that eyebrow. And let me show you what I did. This is another one of those proportion rules where if you take the height of the eye and stack it on the upper lid, that's where you can find the eyebrow. So here's all the tick marks. I'm going to go in there and adjust it. And you can see I'm using angular transfer. I'm locking my arm and elbow and wrist at that angle of the eyebrow in order to get the shape of the eyebrow somewhat correct. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect at this stage, but it would be nice if the angle is correct from the get-go. I think I was just like curious about that angle to the eyebrow, so I was focused on that. You can do whatever order. You are kind of getting an outline, or more specifically, it's a gesture of the eyebrow and of the eye shape too. And when you do this, you want to go lightly. And you want to actually use more of the side of your pencil so you don't get too sharp of a line. You want to avoid sharp lines in the face. There's very few places where there actually are sharp lines. So you want to always go soft edged and light at first. And there's that kind of almond shape to the eye, sort of like a football. You want to make sure that you get in the caruncle, which is that little pink thing in the corner of the eye nearest the nose. You want to check if your model has a crease above their upper lid. A lot of people often do. And not necessarily does the left eye match the right, like you're seeing in this model, that she's got a distinctive crease on the eye that's on our right. But if you look at the left eye, it's not really her left, but if you look at the eye that's on the left, that crease is kind of covering the eye a little bit. So here's the overall shape so far, and you can see I'm using broken lines in places. That's okay, it's encouraged actually. And I'm going to go in there without outlining the iris, and I'm just going to start to shade in. So this is a little bit different from how anything I've presented to you before. And I'm going carefully, and I'm sort of describing the shape of the iris, but not going in with a heavy outline. And I'm just filling that in. So the iris is the colored part of the eye. And I want to be careful because I don't want to fill in the highlight. I want to work around that ideally. That's what I'm outlining right there. I'm planning ahead for the highlight. So this kind of shading, it's different. It's called modeling. We're modeling the form. Kind of like in chiaroscuro, we're working our way from the darks to the lights, but it's also kind of going out of focus at first and slowly bringing it more and more into focus the more the drawing progresses. I'm just scooted the camera over so you can see what I'm doing a little bit more clearly on that eye, but it is important to gauge the left eye against the right eye and look at both of them at the same time in your drawing to make sure that they look correct. You want the iris to look like it's in the right place on both eyes, so you don't want to have a wandering eye unless your model actually does have one, so you want to be careful of that. I always look at the shape that the white of the eye makes to the left of the iris and to the right, because it helps me figure out how big the pupil and the iris are going to be. And then I also look to see if the iris is touching the bottom lid. Sometimes the iris is a little bit above, there's a little gap. It depends on your model. Almost always the top lid is going to come over the iris. The only time you would see white above the iris there, like on the top, is if a person's really scared and their eyes are wide open. And now I'm shading in the eyebrows. And when I'm shading those in, I'm not quite paying attention to the direction of the actual hairs, but I'm just shading it in. I'm not trying to draw individual hairs, I guess is what I'm saying. So there's all this little light shading that happens too. Now, we talked about leaving some of the gray of the paper or the brown of the paper, whatever color you have, of the paper exposed. You want to do that here too. So I'm not going to shade in everything. It may look like I'm doing a lot, but I'm really not. And you can see I'm changing my pressure. So I'm not always using the same amount of pressure in every area. In fact, I'm really sensitive to that. But I want to make sure that I go light pressure in some areas. Like the bridge of the nose is the hardest thing to get right. So you want to be really careful that you don't use any outlining there. And I'm using soft pressure because I don't want the eyebrows to look like they're part of the nose. I'm going to stop here right before we get into more of the detail work.